The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the quiet streets of Oakwood, a sleepy suburban neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names, or so it seemed. Officer Ramirez had grown accustomed to the calm routine here. For months, he and Max, his loyal German Shepherd partner, had patrolled these streets without incident, the most excitement being a few lost cats or a minor traffic dispute. But on this particular Thursday, something was about to shatter the neighborhood's peaceful veneer. Ramirez checked his watch as he eased the patrol car to a stop near the park, a small green space nestled between rows of quaint houses. Max, sensing the familiar stop, perked up and waited by the door. The dog's sharp ears twitched as the officer opened the door, signaling it was time to stretch their legs. Ramirez clipped Max's leash, and they stepped out onto the cracked pavement, the sound of children playing faint in the distance. They moved slowly along the path, the grass damp from a morning rain, the air thick with the scent of blooming lilacs. Max's nose twitched as he sniffed the breeze, tail wagging lightly. Ramirez admired his partner's energy. Sometimes Max could be overly eager, but today there was something different. As they passed a wooden park bench beneath a towering oak tree, Max suddenly stopped. His ears flattened slightly and his body stiffened. He let out a low guttural growl, a sound Ramirez hadn't heard from him in months. Max's eyes locked onto something on the ground near the bench, and he began to circle slowly, muscles. Tout Ramirez followed his gaze and noticed an old suitcase sitting oddly on the edge of the paved path. It was the kind of suitcase you'd expect to see at a train station decades ago. Scuffed leather corners, rusty clasps, and faded brown fabric that looked like it had weathered countless storms. What made it strange was its sheer out-of-place nature. Who would leave such a thing here unattended and forgotten? Curious but cautious, Ramirez reached down and gently tapped the suitcase's handle. No one was nearby. The park was almost deserted, save for a few distant children on the swings and an elderly couple walking their dog far away. Ramirez glanced around but saw no one acting suspicious or even appearing to own the suitcase. Max growled again, louder, this time, and began scratching at the ground beside the suitcase, his whole body tense as if warning Ramirez of danger. The officer's heart rate quickened. Max wasn't one to bark or growl without good reason. "Stay calm, boy," Ramirez murmured, patting Max's side, but his eyes never left the suitcase. He radioed dispatch, alerting them to the unattended item and requesting backup. "Unit 23, we have a suspicious package at Oakwood Park near the southeast bench, requesting additional units for assistance." Minutes later, the sound of police sirens echoed softly in the distance, breaking the afternoon calm. Ramirez crouched beside Max and the suitcase, running his fingers lightly over the worn surface. The leather was cracked, and the suitcase felt heavier than it looked. As he waited for backup, Ramirez's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Was it a forgotten belonging, or something more sinister? Oakwood had never seen a crime more serious than petty theft, but that didn't mean trouble wasn't lurking beneath the surface. The moment the backup arrived, 2 more officers approached. Cautiously, their eyes scanning the surroundings, Ramirez briefed them quickly, pointing out Max's behavior and the suspicious nature of the suitcase. The team formed a small perimeter, guiding curious onlookers back to keep the area clear. Ramirez pulled on a pair of gloves, steeling himself. With Max standing alert nearby, he slowly unclasped the rusty metal latches. The suitcase creaked open, with an eerie groan, revealing its contents to the fading light. Inside was not what Ramirez expected. A bundle of letters, yellowed with age and tied with a delicate red ribbon, lay stacked neatly on top. Beneath them was a small worn locket and a faded black and white photograph of a boy with solemn eyes. The scent of old paper and forgotten memories filled the air. Ramirez's brow furrowed as he carefully lifted the letters, wondering what story had been hidden in this forgotten suitcase, why it had been left here and what it meant for the quiet town of Oakwood. Max whimpered softly, resting his head on Ramirez's knee, as if sensing the weight of what had just been uncovered, a mystery waiting to unfold. The thin afternoon light dimmed as Officer Ramirez carefully lifted the first of the yellowed letters from the suitcase. The paper crackled softly between his gloved fingers, fragile with age and stained by time. He squinted to read the faded cursive writing, the words uneven but filled with urgent emotion. "Dear Michael," the letter began. Ramirez's breath caught. This wasn't just forgotten luggage. It was a window into someone's heartache. Backup. Officers kept a vigilant watch nearby as Ramirez scanned the letter quickly, absorbing its desperate tone. The writer, a woman named Mary, pleaded for news of her son, Michael, who had disappeared many years ago. The letter was one of many, each one an outpouring of love and anguish. Mary's handwriting grew shakier with each page, evidence of a mother's growing despair. Max shifted beside Ramirez, his ears flicking toward a low murmur in the distance. But Ramirez was locked onto the suitcase's contents. He found more letters, carefully folded photographs of a smiling boy with bright eyes and a small silver locket tarnished with age. He opened the locket gently and found a faded picture of the same boy, Michael, next to a woman who must have been Mary. "Where have you been all these years, Michael?" one letter read. "The silence is unbearable. I will never stop looking for you." Ramirez looked up, suddenly aware of the weight of the discovery. This wasn't just a lost suitcase. It was a frozen story of grief and hope that had somehow been left behind, waiting to be found. The other officers began to spread out, talking quietly with nearby residents and neighbors who had stopped to watch the scene unfold. Ramirez scanned the faces, some curious, some worried. It wasn't common to see police investigating something so mysterious in Oakwood. "Has anyone reported a missing person named Michael?" Ramirez asked a middle-aged woman who had cautiously approached. The Sioux woman's face paled. "That was years ago, Sir Michael Thompson, Mary's boy. No one ever found out what happened to him." Ramirez's pulse quickened. The name was familiar. He had heard whispers of the case long buried in cold files. But nothing concrete, just rumors and sadness. "I want to see the rest of the contents," he said firmly. "Maybe there's more clues here." Back at the patrol car, Ramirez carefully organized the letters and photographs, photographing each item for evidence. Max stayed alert, his nose twitching at the faint scents lingering around the suitcase. As the officers sifted through the contents, a chilling realization settled over them. The letters hinted at something more than just a disappearance. They spoke of strange visitors, threats, and a secret that Mary had feared would destroy her family. Who could have wanted to harm Michael? One officer muttered. Ramirez frowned, scanning the letters for names or hints. The writing mentioned a man only referred to as Mr. Black, a shadowy figure whose name was never spoken aloud in the neighborhood. Locals had always whispered about him but never dared to confront him. The mystery deepened. Just as Ramirez was about to set the letters aside, Max suddenly barked sharply, drawing his attention. The dog's instincts were razor-sharp, and his body was tense again. Ramirez looked around and spotted something peculiar, a small, almost invisible piece of fabric snagged beneath the bench. He crouched and pulled it free. A torn piece of an old jacket, stained and frayed. "Looks like someone dropped this here a long time ago," Ramirez said, showing it to the other officers. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine. Had the suitcase been left here recently? Or was this a relic of a darker past, hidden beneath the calm streets? Ramirez decided they needed to dig deeper, both figuratively and literally. He contacted the department's cold case unit, requesting files on Michael Thompson's disappearance, and any connections to Mr. Black. Meanwhile, the suitcase and its contents were carefully bagged for forensic examination. Word of the suitcase spread quickly in the community. Rumors swirled like wildfire. Some said it was a warning, others whispered about a curse. But Ramirez knew better. This was a call for answers, long overdue. As dusk settled over Oakwood, Ramirez sat in his patrol car, Max resting beside him, the suitcase's contents laid out before him. The peaceful facade of the neighborhood had cracked, revealing secrets long buried, and the real story was only beginning. The night had deepened over Oakwood, and the streetlights cast long, wavering shadows across the empty park. Officer Ramirez sat at his desk, surrounded by folders, old newspaper clippings, and photographs pulled from the suitcase. Max lay quietly at his feet, occasionally lifting his head to watch his partner, sensing the gravity of the moment. Ramirez had spent the evening piecing together the heartbreaking story woven through Mary's letters. Each word echoed a mother's desperate search for her missing son, Michael Thompson, who had vanished without a trace more than 50 years ago. What made the case unsettling was not just the mystery of Michael's disappearance, but the dark hints scattered throughout the letters, whispers of fear, threats, and the shadowy figure known only as Mr. Black. Ramirez flipped through the final letter, dated shortly before Mary's own death. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged as if she had been crying. "If anything should happen to me, Michael, know that I never stopped loving you. The truth will come to light one day, even if it takes a lifetime." The letter was a silent plea, and Ramirez felt a lump form in his throat. Who was Mary really writing to? And why had these letters been left in the park, hidden for decades? Just as Ramirez was about to close the folder, Max suddenly stood, ears perked. The dog's eyes fixed on the corner of the room where the suitcase lay unopened on a table. He let out a low whine, then barked once. Ramirez moved over, puzzled. "What is it, boy?" Max padded over and nosed the suitcase gently. It was old and battered, but the faint smell of earth and time clung to it like a secret. Ramirez knelt beside it and carefully opened the worn case again. Beneath the letters, he discovered a small weathered journal bound in cracked leather. The cover was stamped with faint initials, M.T. His heart quickened. The journal belonged to Michael. With cautious hands, Ramirez opened the fragile pages. The faded ink inside was barely legible, but the words told a chilling story. Michael had been just a boy when strange men arrived in Oakwood, people who didn't belong. They brought fear and suspicion with them, whispers of a hidden crime syndicate, led by the elusive Mr. Black, who controlled much of the town's dark underbelly. Michael had stumbled upon something dangerous, something that put his life in peril. The entries grew more frantic as the months passed. Michael wrote of secret meetings, shadowy figures watching him from alleys, and threats that made him hide in fear. His final entry was a frantic scribble. "They are coming. I must disappear or they will find me." Ramirez felt a chill creep down his spine. This wasn't just a cold case, it was a forgotten warning. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled. "Him?" It was Sergeant Jenkins, an older officer with decades of experience and a reputation for uncovering the town's deepest secrets. "I heard you found something," Jenkins said quietly, stepping inside. "That suitcase, it's the key to a story Oakwood has tried to bury." Ramirez nodded, handing Jenkins the journal. Michael's journal. His words are haunting. It feels like the past is reaching out to us. Jenkins sighed. "I remember the rumors. People were too scared to talk back then. But with this, we might finally get some answers." They pored over the journal together, cross-referencing dates and names. One name stood out repeatedly. James Crawford, a man who once ran a local factory but disappeared mysteriously around. At the same time, Michael vanished. Crawford was suspected of running illegal operations, Jenkins whispered, but nothing was ever proven. Ramirez's mind raced. Could Crawford have been Mr. Black? Had Michael been silenced to protect the truth? Outside, Max's bark cut through the quiet night. Ramirez looked toward the window and saw the dark silhouette of a figure watching from across the street, just beyond the glow of the porch lights. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "Jenkins," Ramirez said, "we're not alone in wanting to keep this secret buried." Jenkins nodded grimly. "We need to move fast. If there are still people out there who don't want this uncovered, we're walking into dangerous territory." Ramirez felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a storm cloud. The suitcase had been just the beginning. Now, with Michael's story in their hands, they were diving into a mystery that had haunted Oakwood for decades, a mystery that could shake the very foundation of the town. Max whimpered softly, resting his head against Ramirez's leg, as if sensing the road ahead would be long and difficult. But Ramirez was ready. Whatever lay in the shadows, he would face it head-on, because some stories, no matter how painful, demanded to be told. The following morning, the Oakwood police station buzzed with renewed energy, the quiet hum of computers and ringing phones, a sharp contrast to the grim discoveries of the night before. Officer Ramirez and Sergeant Jenkins sat in the dimly lit conference room, strewn with old newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and Michael's fragile journal. The weight of decades-old secrets pressed down on them. Ramirez leaned forward, tracing a name in the journal's margins: James Crawford, the factory owner whose sudden disappearance had been whispered about but never solved. Jenkins rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Crawford had powerful enemies. He wasn't just any businessman, he was deeply involved in Oakwood's underground. Gambling, smuggling, the works. But nothing was ever proven because everyone was too scared to talk. Ramirez's mind raced. Could Michael have been a witness, or worse, a victim? They decided to visit the local historical society, hoping to dig up more information about Crawford and the town's shadowy past. The building, an old brick structure covered in ivy, stood like a forgotten guardian of Oakwood's memories. Inside, the curator, Mrs. Ellen Harper, a kindly elderly woman with sharp eyes, welcomed them. When they mentioned Michael Thompson and James Crawford, her expression darkened. "Those were dangerous times," she said softly. "Many people closed their eyes, hoping the past would just disappear." Mrs. Harper pulled out a dusty file marked Unsolved Disappearances. Inside were reports about Michael Thompson and others who had vanished mysteriously during the late 1960s and early 70s. The patterns were chilling. Young men and boys, all linked somehow to Crawford's factory. People feared Crawford's reach, Mrs. Harper explained. He had a network of loyalists. If you crossed him, you vanished. Ramirez's stomach churned. The suitcase, the letters, the journal, they were all threads in a tangled web of fear and silence. Back at the station, Ramirez and Jenkins gathered more clues, piecing together a timeline. Michael's last journal entry mentioned a secret meeting at the factory, a phrase that stood out starkly. Could it have been a trap? Ramirez's phone buzzed, a call from the forensic lab. The fabric they found near the suitcase had traces of old paint and chemicals used in factories decades ago. It wasn't a coincidence. As they prepared to visit the now-abandoned factory, Ramirez couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every glance out the window caught shadows lurking just beyond the streetlights, and Max's constant alertness heightened the tension. The factory loomed ahead like a ghost from another era, its broken windows staring blankly like hollow eyes. The gates creaked as they pushed them open, stepping into the cold silence. The scent of rust and decay filled the air. Inside, graffiti covered the walls, but the remnants of machinery told a story of industry turned silent. Ramirez scanned the shadows, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Then Max stopped abruptly, ears pricked forward, nose twitching. Ramirez followed the dog to a corner where the floorboards were uneven. Kneeling, he pried a loose board and discovered a hidden hatch. His heart pounded as he lifted it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. With only their flashlights piercing the black, Ramirez and Jenkins descended carefully. At the bottom was a cramped, dust-covered room. On a small table lay more papers and a rusted metal box. Inside they found documents revealing bribes, threats, and names, residents who had been paid off or silenced by Crawford's men. One piece of paper was stained with something dark, possibly blood. Ramirez swallowed hard. Suddenly a noise echoed from above, a metallic clang and hurried footsteps. "Someone else is here," Jenkins whispered. They scrambled up the stairs just as a shadowy figure disappeared through the broken front door. Ramirez cursed under his breath. The past wasn't done with Oakwood yet. Someone still guarded its secrets fiercely. Back outside, the officers shared a grim look. The discovery was more than just history. It was a warning. That night, as Ramirez sat at home with Max by his side, his thoughts raced. The suitcase had unlocked a door to the past, but it had also opened a door to danger in the present. Oakwood's shadows were deeper than anyone had imagined, and Ramirez knew the real fight was just beginning. The wind howled softly through the broken windows of the old Crawford factory, carrying with it a cold bite that cut through even the thickest jacket. Officer Ramirez couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at his gut as he and Sergeant Jenkins returned to the abandoned building after dark. They weren't alone. Someone else had been there before them, and that thought made every shadow seem alive with threat. Max stayed close to Ramirez's side, his ears twitching and nose working. Over time, every muscle alert. Ramirez had come to trust Max's instincts implicitly, and tonight was no different. The dog's sudden, sharp bark echoed against the hollow walls just as they reached the edge of the decaying factory floor. "Quiet," Ramirez whispered, signaling Jenkins to follow him toward the sound. The two officers moved carefully, flashlights sweeping through the gloom, casting eerie beams on rusted machinery and peeling paint. At the base of the stairs to the secret cellar, Max's growl deepened. Then, without warning, the dog darted forward, nose low to the ground. Ramirez caught up, heart pounding as Max scratched furiously at a loose pile of debris near a rusted pipe. Ramirez dropped to his knees and began moving aside the broken boards and rotted wood. Beneath it was a small weathered metal box, hidden as if deliberately concealed. The lock was broken, but the box was heavy and cold to the touch. With care, Ramirez pried it open. Inside lay a collection of brittle photographs, official-looking. Papers and, most chilling, a small blood-stained handkerchief. Ramirez's breath caught. The images showed James Crawford with various shadowy figures, many unknown to Ramirez, but clearly connected by their grim expressions and tense postures. On the back of one photo, a scrawled note read, "The meeting, June 1971. Ramirez glanced at the date, then back at the papers. These were records of bribes, threats, and payments, proof of Crawford's corruption, and the fear he wielded over Oakwood. Then his eyes landed on a folded piece of paper, different from the rest. Unfolding it carefully, Ramirez found a map, an old hand-drawn layout of the factory and the surrounding woods. A red X marked a spot just outside the main entrance. "What do you think is out there?" Jenkins asked quietly, peering over Ramirez's shoulder. Ramirez didn't answer. Instead, he pocketed the map, his mind racing. The discovery was a breakthrough, but it also meant danger was close. Whoever had been here before them had been searching for something important, something they wanted to keep hidden. Suddenly, a loud crash upstairs shattered the silence, and footsteps thundered away. Ramirez and Jenkins exchanged a tense glance. "We're not alone," Ramirez whispered. Max barked again, bounding toward the stairwell. Ramirez followed, his hand instinctively moving to the holster at his side. They burst out of the cellar and into the open factory floor, but the intruder had vanished. Only the echo of hurried footsteps remained. Ramirez cursed under his breath. Whoever had been here wasn't just protecting the past. They were protecting something very dangerous. Back outside, the night air was thick and heavy. Ramirez and Jenkins stayed close, scanning the shadows as Max prowled the perimeter. They decided to follow the map's marked spot immediately. Walking quietly through the overgrown brush behind the factory, Ramirez's flashlight beam fell on a small clearing. There, partially buried under leaves and dirt, was a wooden crate, old and worn but unmistakably out of place. Ramirez knelt and pried it open. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, was a tattered notebook and a bundle of keys. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the notebook. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, diary notes, confessions, and chilling accounts of crimes that Crawford had orchestrated. But one entry stood out, a detailed account of Michael Thompson's disappearance, describing how the boy had been taken to keep him silent forever. Ramirez's chest tightened. The mystery of Michael's vanishing was no accident. It was a calculated act of cruelty. Suddenly, a noise behind them, a twig snapping, made Ramirez spin around, gun drawn. But there was no one there. Max growled low in his throat, his eyes scanning the darkness. Ramirez realized the town's shadows had come alive in a way none of them could have imagined. They had uncovered a truth so dark it would shake Oakwood to its core, and it was only just beginning. Officer Ramirez stared down at the battered notebook, his fingers tracing the faded ink that chronicled Michael Thompson's final days. The weight of decades pressed heavily on his chest. The pages detailed things no one had dared speak aloud. Names of men long believed respectable, locations whispered in dark corners, and chilling accounts of threats against a boy who had tried to uncover too much. Max stood alert beside him, ears twitching to every sound. The cool night air carried the scent of damp earth and decayed leaves, but something else lingered. Unease. Ramirez flipped through the pages again. One entry was dated just days before Michael's disappearance. They say the factory is a fortress now. James Crawford's men watch every door, but if they find me, I'll be gone before nightfall. I'm scared, but I won't stop. The truth has to come out. Ramirez's jaw clenched. This boy had lived in terror yet refused to surrender. Suddenly, the crackle of Ramirez's radio shattered the silence. Dispatcher's voice was tight and urgent. Unit 23, we've got a report of suspicious activity near the factory. Be advised backup is en route. Ramirez's heart pounded. They were being watched. Or worse. Jenkins, he whispered. We need to move out. Now. They packed the notebook and keys carefully, then began retracing their steps through the woods, shadows stretching like ghosts around them. As they approached the factory's edge, the flash of headlights cut through the darkness. 2 squad cars arrived, tires crunching over gravel. Officers spilled out, weapons drawn, ready for whatever waited in the night. Ramirez briefed the team quickly. We found evidence tied to the Thompson case. Someone doesn't want us digging. Jenkins nodded. Grimly. This is bigger than we thought. Suddenly, Max's sharp bark echoed through the trees. The dog lunged toward a dark figure slipping behind a nearby shed. Ramirez and the officers gave chase, the suspect moving swiftly but awkwardly, stumbling over roots and rocks. Finally, they cornered him in a narrow clearing. Stop! Police! Ramirez ordered. The man froze, then dropped to his knees, hands raised. Who are you? Ramirez demanded, catching his breath. The man's eyes darted nervously. I'm just a lookout. I don't want trouble. Who sent you? What do... You know about Michael Thompson? Ramirez pressed. The man swallowed hard. Crawford's men. I was paid to keep watch, make sure no one snoops around. Michael, he found out things he shouldn't have. They made sure he'd never talk. Ramirez's heart sank. The truth was worse than rumors. The man hesitated, then added, voice trembling. There's more, a secret meeting place where they hid evidence. If you want to find it, look near the old mill by the river. Ramirez exchanged a look with Jenkins. The pieces were falling into place. As the officers escorted the man back to the station, Ramirez stood at the edge of the clearing, the notebook clutched tight. The night air was thick with unspoken history, and he knew the journey wasn't over. Back. At the station, Ramirez studied the new lead. The old mill had long been abandoned, a rusting skeleton swallowed by weeds and silence. But if it held answers, they had to go there. The next morning, Ramirez and Jenkins gathered a small team and headed toward the mill. Max trotted ahead, nose to the ground, leading the way. The mill was a relic, broken windows gaping like empty eyes, walls covered in ivy and graffiti. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with dust. They combed through debris and rubble until, Jenkins shouted, holding up a rusted metal box. Ramirez's hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside were more documents, ledgers, photographs, even a small tape recorder. They listened as a crackling voice filled the room, a recording of a meeting where Crawford and his associates discussed silencing troublemakers and covering their tracks. The chilling words confirmed everything Ramirez feared. The corruption had run deep, poisoning Oakwood's roots. Max whined softly, sensing the weight of the moment. Ramirez looked at his dog, then at Jenkins. We have to bring this to light. For Michael. For everyone who suffered. Jenkins nodded. No more hiding in the shadows. But as they gathered the evidence, a sudden noise outside froze them in place. Heavy footsteps approaching fast. Ramirez's hand went to his gun. The past was catching up. The footsteps outside the old mill grew louder, echoing ominously against the cracked walls. Officer Ramirez froze, heart pounding in his chest. His hand hovered over his holstered gun as he motioned for Sergeant Jenkins and the other officers to take cover. Max growled low in his throat, his hackles raised, sensing danger just beyond the broken doorway. Suddenly, the heavy door creaked open with a grinding scrape, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the night sky. The man stepped. Inside, his face obscured by shadow, but the cold glint in his eyes was unmistakable. Looking for me, Officer Ramirez? The voice sneered, low and menacing. Ramirez's grip tightened. Who are you? Why have you been hiding all this time? The man smiled cruelly, stepping forward. You're digging into things that don't belong to you. Michael Thompson's disappearance was just the beginning. Oakwood's peace has been bought with silence, and I intend to keep it that way. Ramirez felt a chill run through him. This was no ordinary criminal. This was someone with power and influence, someone who had controlled the town's darkest secrets for decades. Name's Victor Crane, the man said, pulling back his coat to reveal a hidden pistol. And I'm the last one standing from Crawford's old guard. Ramirez quickly signaled his team to ready their weapons. The tension was electric. You think you can bring me down with some old papers and dusty letters? Crane sneered. You don't understand what you're up against. Suddenly, Crane raised his gun and fired a shot into the air, the loud crack shattering the silence and sending a flock of crows screaming into the night sky. Drop your weapons, Crane barked. This is your last warning. Ramirez's mind raced. He couldn't let Crane escape. Not after everything they had. Uncovered, Max barked sharply, lunging forward. The dog's sudden movement startled Crane, causing him to fire a second shot. This time aimed at Ramirez. Instinct took over. Ramirez dove behind a rusted machine, narrowly avoiding the bullet. Jenkins and the other officers returned fire, shouting orders as chaos erupted. Crane bolted toward a back exit, but Max was already ahead, chasing him through the shadows. The dog's fierce growls echoed as he tackled Crane to the ground. Ramirez rushed over just in time to see Crane struggling beneath Max's relentless grip. The pistol skidded across the concrete floor. Get him in cuffs, Ramirez ordered. Jenkins moved quickly, securing Crane's hands with zip ties as Ramirez radioed for backup and medical assistance. Crane glared up at Ramirez, hatred burning in his eyes. You think this ends here? You don't know who you've made enemies of. Ramirez stood, breathing hard but resolute. You're going to pay for what you did, for Michael, for everyone you hurt. As the officers led Crane away, Ramirez felt a mix of relief and dread. The man was dangerous, but this arrest was only the beginning. There were still others who had kept Oakwood's secrets buried for decades. Back at the station, the evidence seized from the mill and the suitcase was catalogued carefully. The tape recording was played again, and the damning confessions sealed Crane's fate. News of the arrest spread through Oakwood like wildfire. The town's long-buried past was finally coming to light, stirring old wounds and new hope. Meanwhile, Ramirez found himself drawn to the letters again, particularly one last letter from Mary Thompson that had been tucked away in the suitcase's lining. It was a simple note, written in trembling handwriting. If you find this, know that my love for Michael never faded. I hope the truth will set us free. Ramirez felt tears prick his eyes. The suitcase had brought justice and closure to a story that had haunted Oakwood for generations. Max nuzzled his hand, offering silent comfort. But Ramirez knew the road ahead was still uncertain. The shadows of the past were beginning to fade. But they left scars that would take time to heal. And for Ramirez, the promise to protect the truth had become a lifelong mission. The morning sun filtered gently through the blinds of the Oakwood Police Department, casting warm stripes across Officer Ramirez's cluttered desk. The suitcase, now a silent witness to decades of pain and secrets, sat closed beside a stack of folders labeled Thompson Case Closed. Ramirez leaned back in his chair, eyes heavy but satisfied. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of revelations, confrontations, and hard-fought victories. Victor Crane was behind bars, facing charges that spanned corruption, intimidation, and worse. The evidence found in the factory and the mill had ignited a community's courage to confront its darkest chapters. But even as the town began to heal, Ramirez understood that scars ran deep. The phone on his desk rang, and he recognized the voice immediately. Clara Thompson, Michael's niece and the only living relative Ramirez had managed to locate after months of searching. Officer Ramirez, she said softly, voice trembling, I got your message. I've been going through some of the letters you sent me. I can't believe what my family went through. Ramirez swallowed the lump in his throat. It's a lot to take in, Clara, but your family's story deserves to be told. Thanks to Max and some old courage, we finally have some answers. There was a pause on the line, and then Clara's voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you. For everything. For not giving up on Michael, on all of us." Ramirez nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "He was brave. So was your grandmother. And so are you." After the call, Ramirez stood and walked outside the station, Max trotting. Faithfully by his side, the town was waking up, neighbors greeting each other, children playing in the streets, the familiar hum of everyday life. But beneath the surface, Ramirez sensed something new, a quiet strength, a collective will to face the past and build a better future. He thought back to the suitcase, its worn leather and hidden contents, and how a dog's keen instincts had set this all in motion. Max looked up at him, tail wagging gently, eyes full of trust and loyalty. Ramirez reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears. "You did good, boy. You changed everything." Weeks later, a community memorial was held at the park where the suitcase had been found. Families gathered, some with tears, others with hesitant smiles. Clara Thompson spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We remember Michael not just as the boy who disappeared, but as a symbol of hope and truth. His story reminds us that even when darkness tries to silence us, light will find a way." Ramirez stood in the crowd, watching as the town came together, a healing beginning, born from pain and perseverance. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ramirez sat on his porch, Max curled at his feet. The suitcase was gone, safely stored in the town's museum as a testament to the past. Ramirez reflected on everything they'd uncovered, the corruption, the fear, the loss. But more than that, he thought about the power of one dog's loyalty and one officer's determination. In a world often shadowed by darkness, sometimes all it takes is a spark and a moment of courage to bring the truth into the light, and sometimes healing begins when the past is no longer buried in silence. Max yawned and stretched, content and peaceful. Ramirez smiled softly. "Ready for whatever comes next, partner?" Max gave a happy bark in reply. Together, they faced the future. No longer just guardians of Oakwood's safety, but keepers of its stories, its memories, and its hope.